Está con nosotros Houston Costa, representando a UTA, United Talent Artists. Es una agencia de representación, pero va mucho más allá, como está pasando en la mayoría de las agencias que tenemos en mente en el mercado norteamericano. Han pasado de representar a individuos solos a paquetizar conceptos. Por lo tanto, plantearos esta sesión como una puerta de acceso al mercado norteamericano. Él representa esta búsqueda de proyectos, esta búsqueda de talento al mismo tiempo. Okay, thanks so much for being here, Houston.
Yeah, thank you.
The floor is yours. And I present you like the door to the North American market.
Yeah.
So
this is it.
My expectation is very high.
Okay, all
Thanks
right.
so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Well, I don't understand Spanish, so I assume, told you guys I'm from UTA, but I just want to say, first and foremost, thank you to Mònica and Angel and Patricia and Aram for organizing, me coming out here. This is my first time in Sitges, and it is so beautiful and so scenic and romantic, and it totally makes sense why this is a horror film festival, right? I'm like, what? But it's just been such a great time, so I just want to thank, the festival for having me here. And, the purpose of this conversation is to really tell you how to make a movie, but it's really how I make a movie as a talent agent, right? Because the role of a talent agent, especially in the United States, is becoming a little bit more fluid and nimble, where we're not only representing artists, but we're also putting together artists, and packaging movies in order to make opportunities happen. And so I figure maybe what I'll do is just do a quick little background that kind of informs the rest of the conversation in terms of who I am, what I do, and how I even got here. But just, quickly, so I'm American. I was born in New York, but I was raised in Las Vegas, Nevada, and then I went to school in Los Angeles and studied film. And then I had a bunch of odd jobs, and how it works at the agencies is that, somehow I fell into the mailroom of an agency. So in the United States, there's all these different management companies and talent agencies that represent artists, but there's only 3 major talent agencies: UTA, CAA, and WME. And we all kind of do the same thing. You can switch around the letters, but there's basically 3. There used to be 4, but 2 merged to make one big one. And so when you start at an agency, you start in the mailroom sorting mail with the mail cart, whatever it is, and then you slowly climb the ladder. But what's so interesting about that process is that it's kind of like college. You get to declare if you want to work with actors, if you want to work in books, if you want to work in filmmakers or financiers. You kind of just declare your major, right, or your department. And so the department that I chose when I was coming up was working with actors. And because I realized early on that you could replace Sam Taylor Johnson on 50 Shades of Grey, but you can't replace Dakota Johnson and Jamie Dornan. And I was like, I just want to be part of that power, which, again, which has been super helpful and worked out for me as it pertains to putting together movies. And so I started my career at WME, and I worked there for about 3 years before I jumped ship to work at UTA, and I've been at UTA for 10 years, or 11 years. It's been a long time. And, again, started my career representing actors. I'm not sure if anyone looked up perhaps who I represent, but I work mostly in the international space, and so some actors that you might know of, like Alicia Vikander, Bill Nighy, Gillian Anderson. Those are some of the names that I look after that obviously are known within the genre space. But like most people, I have a bit of an ego, meaning I don't like being told no, and I don't like when something that I'm personally passionate about is rejected or denied. And so the problem with the whole casting process and being a talent agent is that if you are just simply representing actors, you're kind of at the whim of the market. So basically, I have to wait for something to be casting in order to get a job for my client, right? That's kind of how it works. And that's just not how I am. That's not how I was raised. I'm a very industrious kind of person, and that's why we call it industry, the industry of Hollywood. And so I was like, well, I work at this major agency that represents all these filmmakers, all these writers, all these producers. We represent financiers. If I just roll up my sleeves, perhaps I can actually create opportunity rather than just waiting for it to just appear. And so I started putting together movies when I was pretty young, early on in my career, because I also realized I have access to the talent, and that's access that a lot of people I realize just don't have. And when you're in it, you're kind of like, oh, this is normal, but you forget the responsibility and the power of being able to read a script called Palm Springs and give it to Andy Samberg, and then it becomes, this big hit out of Sundance, and maybe, hopefully, you guys have seen it. But some of the other films I was able to put together were Synchronic, if you guys have seen that one. I believe it premiered here as well. Another one, Baby Ruby, that was a crazy story putting together. And then this one that premiered at Toronto called The Assessment with Melissa Vikander. That one's an incredible film. And so it's been great because a lot of those opportunities were not just a casting director calling or producer calling. It was me coming in with the piece of talent and putting it together and building it around the talent. And so that's basically kind of just like the introduction. And so how I want to go about this is kind of common questions that I'm asked as an agent. And then at the end, we'll do like a Q&A because I just want to make sure if you guys have any questions that I answer them. But I think one of the biggest questions is like, how does someone like me find material? Find Synchronic, find Palm Springs, find whatever the film may be. Like, how does that script get on my desk? And the most simple answer is oftentimes it's just referrals and, recommendations. We're an agency in a weird way, if you think about it like a government, is like the CIA. We have all the information, we have everyone's contact information, and so we get a lot of inquiries, we get a lot of submissions all the time. And so for me, when I was coming up, I really focused my career on building relationships with lit managers. And just side note, managers and agents are very similar. Sometimes it's like, what's the difference between the two? Managers are just smaller. It's a little bit more intimate. When a client that's signed with the manager, they like normally develop them, give them a bunch of notes, et cetera. The idea is that once the client is big enough or has like a launching pad, they go to the agency that has the resources. Because when a management company maybe has 50 employees, UTA has 3,000, right? So it kind of gives you the scale of what we're able to do to take a client and really launch them to the next level in making massive deals and et cetera. But truth is, sometimes the job does blend because some clients, like Sandra Huller, who I work with, like I do everything for her. I'm her manager, I'm her agent, I'm her attorney, we do it all, right? And so there is some of the blurred lines, but just kind of jumping back into the conversation, I wanted to find where I can get the best material. And I started reaching out to lit managers because they represent and they're developing clients and they're giving them notes, and I found that that's where I could get a lot of really great material. But when you come up in the industry, you just develop relationships with producers and it's kind of like birds of a feather flock together. I don't know if you say that in Spain or whatever, but the films that I watch, are oftentimes by producers that are friends of mine at this point because we all kind of have the same taste. And it's the same exact reason why you all are here today. What the common denominator is that you love genre. And so you kind of everyone finds each other. And so through that, you get a script from a producer, you get a script from an executive, and whatnot. But for me personally, my favorite way to source material is from the filmmaker, the artist, the talent themselves. That's just always the best because at that point we can take it and really put it together. And for me, some of my favorite movies are those that are self-authored by the filmmaker. So, the term auteur filmmakers, like those are my favorite kind of filmmakers. And those are actually the filmmakers that I represent, like Alejandro Landis, who did Monos. He writes his own material. And so it's just fun because they basically just, they give you the food. They're like, okay, like, let's just make it happen, and it gets really fun and creative when we get to do the casting and stuff. And so like an example of this is, there's a filmmaker named Natasha Kermani who is fantastic, but she's a filmmaker that has kind of flown under the radar in the genre space. She's American. She's had 2 films at like Fantastic Fest and what's the other festival? South by Southwest. And you know, she wrote the script that was like a, how would I describe it? Like a medieval Gothic fairy tale nightmare. And it's just 3 characters. And she was trying to put together all these films, but I just was like, that script, it's available, right? Is this the one that you still want to make? She's like, I really want to make it, I just don't know how. And so she gave me the script to work with, because I just was like, I knew that she just needed the opportunity to really flex, because this is like definitely a visionary showcase. And so when putting together that film, you know, I got it from, again, the filmmaker herself. My whole thing, the first thought that I'm thinking is like, okay, well, who's always on a set? That's who I want to submit the script to. Because here's a filmmaker who's kind of been a bit of a journeyman, who's kind of been very nimble in putting together things, and what she needs is not necessarily the biggest production company banner. She needs a producer that is just always working, that knows how to make movies in a nimble way. And, you know, paired it up with Greg Loretano. At that point, we're thinking of cast. We got it to Sophie Turner. We got it to Kit Harington, who we don't even represent at UTA, but still, even though we don't represent talent, we still have access, and we still can use our context to put things together. And now it's going to shoot in a month, which is super exciting. But that was an example of it just, you know, came to me from the filmmaker. It's just a passion project, and it just was a really, really great script. And so something too that's like, that I've seen in my career so far, like more post-COVID is, and I'm sure you all have seen it too, is the globalization of content, meaning like we're watching things that are not in our own language now, and that's super exciting. And I remember when The Platform, I don't know what the Spanish title is, but when The Platform premiered here, it was a big deal, and everyone watched it in the United States. And everyone watched Squid Game, and everyone watched Parasite, and everyone watched The Wailing and whatnot, right? And so those are becoming more and more common, and the reason why I bring it up in this room specifically is that the Spanish language market is massive. And it's been a massive priority for just the agencies in general to try to tap into it, because even just in the United States alone, most of the moviegoers are Latino audiences. And so this means that projects that are in the Spanish language are still being considered. There are financiers, believe it or not, that are interested in making those films. Now, when it comes to making those films, and when I receive a project that is in a different language, I have to think about, okay, what is the genre that it is in? And the truth is, horror, sci-fi, those kind of movies typically are the easiest to put together. First of all movie making, putting together a movie is a miracle. Like, it's very difficult. But I say this, like, if you want to produce a drama, it's very, very hard in today's market. If you want to produce a Western, you know, the sales companies will tell you that they don't work internationally, right? But horror always, for the most part, does. It just works, because it can be made for cheap, and there's a guaranteed audience like the one in this room right now. And so when we're looking at material, especially from foreign language, if it has like a genre bent to it, it becomes an easier pathway to getting made. So, but the thing about material that we don't do at an agency is we don't accept unsolicited material. No major agency takes unsolicited projects. What does that mean? It means we only take projects from people that have established reputable relationships with our company. As you can imagine, we're getting sent so many scripts. I can't even imagine the lawsuits that happen because someone thinks that some idea that Greta Gerwig had for Barbie was this person's idea for Barbie. It's like, there's always like something that comes up. And the policy at the companies is like, you know, in terms of just for liability reasons, is to not accept it. So if you want to get your project, frankly, on my desk or a desk of an agent, it just has to be with someone that, you know, you see that I've worked with, like, oh, I know you produced this film for Alicia Vikander, I know you produced this film for Greta Lee, blah, 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 can you send this to, the agent, et cetera. Because the truth is the elevator pitch is also not a thing anymore these days. It's just, it used to be kind of like the old school way of like, okay, give me 30 seconds, blah, 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 let me do it. But with an agency, we have so much that we have to filter. For me, again, the litmus is it coming, from a reputable person. The exception is sometimes us as reps, we go on, have you heard of the blacklist scripts? Have you heard of that? Yeah, so there's that. We look at those. We look at who has won script contests, the Nichols Fellowship, the Final Cut, whatever lab, whatever. There's all these contests that we also source material from because, they've been vetted already for us. So, and oftentimes they're really great pieces of material. So anyways, so that's basically kind of a bit of the criteria, and I can get so micro with this, and so, talking about the minutia, but that's how I source material, that's how material comes to my desk, and that's how that's what I look at when I'm trying to put together a film. Now, the next thing is, how do agents, or how does someone like me even identify the filmmakers to work with? Because there's a lot of people that want to be filmmakers that are pursuing that as a career. It's amazing, and it's very, very hard. And the problem is that, agents are humans just like everyone else, and we just have our own tastes. So there's things that I like that perhaps you guys don't like at all, and there's things that you guys like that, like, I'm never going to see Terrifier. That looks really scary to me, right? But there's a whole group of people that love it, and it's a big audience, and I totally can appreciate it. Even more so, like, there's a whole audience that loves Yorgos Lanthimos movies. I totally get it. That's not for me. And so I say this to say, like, with filmmakers, it is an art. I have to acknowledge how hard it is, because it's when it comes to, one, finding representation, finding not even representation, someone on the agency side to back your project. It's also making sure that that person is aligned creatively, because when it is, then that's when the magic really happens. And so when it comes to filmmaking talent, the most common, often way is like through scouting. I go see a movie in a movie theater, I love it, and I reach out. An example I brought up is Synchronic. I saw The Endless in a movie theater by Moorhead and Benson. I was like, this was made for $2, but it was amazing. Which is another thing. It doesn't have to be a big budget to make a really impressive film. Like, it's all about the story, and it's all about the craft. But I saw this film in the theaters, and then I think I was like me and like 2 other people, and it just blew me away. And of course, their contact was on IMDb, and I reached out to them, and they were like, we've been waiting for this call, and I was like, well, what do you have? And they said, well, we have a script that's been on the shelf for a long time called Synchronic, and we've told it's never going to get made. Turns out, Synchronic is based in New Orleans. UTA represents Anthony Mackie, who lives in New Orleans, and I know wants to do a job at home, and this is a leading role for him. So that was, boom, there. I represent Jamie Dornan, and I was like, okay, well, he's perfect for the co-lead. Him and Anthony like each other. Let's put them together. And it was also my introduction with XYZ Films, who I know has a big presence here, and that was our first project together, because they were like, who's this guy that's like putting together this film? Because XYZ Films have been the producer for Moorhead and Benson. And so then we made it, and it became, especially on Netflix, a massive hit for them. And now Moorhead and Benson, they're directing Marvel series. Their career is just incredible right now. It's amazing. But that's just an example of, like, oftentimes we just go and see a film, and some of the programmers in the festival and people who are running this festival know I will ask, what do I need to see? What is something that I need to pay attention to? Because we're always trying to find the diamond in the rough as well. And by the way, so that's a feature. Another example is a short film. Short films are totally great, are very much taken seriously in our industry, and I think we're seeing a lot of projects that are adapted from the short films that become feature-length films at studios and whatnot. And we're seeing a lot of these short filmmakers get a lot of shots at, at studio films or, getting their feature debut just off of like one short film. And recently I went to this school in Belgium called KASK, K-A-S-K, and they recommended some shorts for me to watch, and this one was a horror short, in the Flemish language, but had subtitles, and it was very similar to like The Witch by Robert Eggers, and I was like, there's something here, and I reached out to him, and he pitched me his idea, and I was like, let's put it together. And so that's an example of like, it was recommended to me, I saw it, we're putting it together, and I forget the website that it's on, but it's like on a popular YouTube channel where they do a lot of like horror short films. And so, again, just like scripts, another way that how we identify filmmakers is through referrals. We're told, like, check this out, here's a link, you should pay attention to this film, we hear good things, blah, 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 blah. And, or this person has a really good script, watch their music video work, watch their commercial work, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, that works. Because again, it comes from someone that I trust their taste. There's an established alliance and an alignment with the person that is making the reference. And, but ultimately, even if I see someone's commercial work and it's incredible, because we've seen a lot of like amazing music videos, we've seen a lot of short films, but the truth is not everyone can just make the transition to narrative filmmaking, like to do a feature length. And I know it's kind of weird. It's like the same thing in television. Not every TV director can become a feature filmmaker. Not every feature filmmaker is good as a television director. There's a lot of examples that I won't name here, but at a very high level. And so, there's things that I try to, how do I say, like, you try to smoke out, the real on a filmmaker. You just ask some questions and to figure out if they have, frankly, what I think I need. I don't want to say what it takes, but it's like what I need as an agent to pursue this and to get this across the finish line, because at that point, I'm sticking my neck out in the industry and putting my taste on the line and my reputation and my relationships on the line to get something made. And so I need to make sure that the person that I'm advocating for can back it up, can enter a room and really close the deal. And so, of course, the script has to be excellent. The script has to be fantastic, especially if you're a debut filmmaker. Like, it can't be like it's a work in progress. It has to be, oh, this is ready to go out to talent. It's ready to be read. And in my mind, I'm always like, would I put this in front of Gillian Anderson? And if I feel confident enough to put it in front of someone like her, then I'd say I feel confident enough to show it to really anyone. This is pretty obvious, but I can dissect it and we can talk about it in Q&A, but the vision has to be solid and bold. Like, there has to be something that is fresh and bold and very clear. And bold doesn't mean explosions, big this, big that. It can be very simple, but it could be as bold means it's talking about something that no one's explored before. It's talking about a subject matter that is very taboo, but doing it in a sensitive way. Like, it's thematically interesting that we haven't seen before, and the vision behind it is very clear and simple and concise. This is not a genre film, but some of my favorite, well, I guess it could be a genre film if you think about it. Yeah, let's call it a genre film. But one of my favorite films of in the 21st century is The Zone of Interest. I mean, it is a horror film in a way, but it's very simple. And the message behind it is frankly really bold. And so that's something that excites me, because even if it's controversial, it at least starts a conversation. And so that's something when I'm always like, I'll ask a filmmaker, like, so what are you trying to say? What are you questioning? What are you interrogating? And how do you plan to tell it? We always look at lookbooks, especially for a debut. You need a lookbook. We can't just say oh, I have a good script and I can direct it. Like, we need to see how you plan on shooting it. And it's not just putting together really pretty pictures that were shot on film of Brigitte Bardot and Shelley Duvall, and it's look how cool and hipster I am. We need to know what the color is going to look like, what the music is going to be, not just the music, what the sound design is going to be, what are the references, you know, who are the actors that inspire, and why those actors, like what is the character, like we look at these lookbooks and sometimes they really do tell a whole story and you're just like, wow, it's very clear. There's a filmmaker, we put together his film called The Plague, and it's a debut. His lookbook was incredible. And the story is, which you guys, I'm sure it will be at Sitges next year, which I'm super excited about because we're very excited about this film. But it's just at a water polo camp, and we've all, you know, as young children, men and women, you know, been to, you know, like camps for either Christian camps or athletic camps or sleepaway camps, and this happens to be a water polo camp, and they're all like little pre-teenagers, and the bully is like, you don't want to hang out with that kid, he has the plague. And it's kind of like the cooties, you know, I don't know what you guys say in Spain, but like in America it's like, oh, you have the cooties, don't touch. But it's like, is the plague real, is it not? And the way that this lookbook kind of progressed in terms of like, oh, it's like whatever the plague, but it became like, it became a psychological experience, you know, going through this lookbook, because it ultimately becomes an insane body horror film that is tackling the conversation of toxic masculinity. It has a vision, it's bold, the script was simple and concise, it was like 90 pages, and it was just, when I read it, I was like, it was actually, this was a scenario where the filmmaker was a reference from another writer who I trust, had another film that I was like, I'm sorry, it's not gonna get made. You have a bodybuilder, this bodybuilder script that you wrote is better than the 3 bodybuilder movies in post-production, but it's not gonna get made for a debut because there's already 3 bodybuilder movies that are gonna come out. One called Magazine Dreams, there was one called Manodrome, and then another one with Kristen Stewart, Love Lies Bleeding. And I was like, what else do you have? And he showed me The Plague, and then we put it together. And so, again, a lookbook, a sizzle reel can really show a lot. And it's oftentimes what is required by financiers when we're going out to them. Obviously, like the short films, like seeing that stuff, that's like important. And for me, it's like when I look at a short film too, I want to see if there's actually a story, if I feel something. Because we've all seen those beautiful commercial spots, those beautiful music videos, but they're a little too abstract, a little too atmospheric. Like, we need to entertain. Like, we need to, again, it's the reason why you all are here. Like, the thing about genre, which is so special, is that it's a very entertaining genre. It's like you go and you scream and you jump and you laugh and you cry, and so if you're not getting that out of a short film or previous work, it's gonna be really hard to convince everyone else that you can direct this feature-length film that you want to direct. And so, you know, so basically the whole point is that when we put together a lot of these films, once we've identified the filmmaker, et cetera, and we're putting together independently, what we do is that, you know, we go to festivals with them, right? And that's also where we just happen to do a lot of scouting for filmmakers. You know, every festival kind of has a symbolic meaning in a way. Like Sundance, for instance, is like very famous for launching so many careers. And you have South by Southwest, which was very known for like the left of center kind of projects. And so that's where we find the filmmakers. That's where we also try to place certain films based on the film. You know, obviously Sitges is like the Cannes Film Festival. It's like, if Cannes is Cannes, Sitges is that for like horror and genre. It's the most prestigious. But then you have Fantastic Fest that's also very like, more broad, right? And it's also where it's been able to launch a lot of careers. And we could talk about that as well, and obviously there's Cannes and Venice and Telluride and whatnot. But those are places where we try to find the filmmaking talent, where we try to place the films, and where we try to sell the films for distribution. And so the last thing is, in terms of a filmmaker, which is super important, is I need to make sure that this filmmaker can also sell themselves. Because ultimately, agents are not in the room with the financier. We set up the meeting and we're like, close it, you know, like we pitch, we were like, hey, A24, I believe in this filmmaker, this is the next Ari Aster, this is the next blah, 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 meet. And it's up to that filmmaker that, you know, to go into the room with that executive and to convince them that they are special. And that's not like doing the bada bing, bada boom kind of thing, but it's oftentimes your presence. It's oftentimes being very clear. It's knowing your project, like the back of your hand. There was a scenario where, not to bring her up again, but we have Alicia Vikander doing not a genre film, but a drama, and it's with a debut filmmaker, which is what is so great about Alicia. She's always been really great when it comes to debuts. And we suggested an actor to the filmmaker who just won an Emmy. And she said no. And we're like, he's like to co-star. And there's a part of me and my colleague, we kind of leaned back and we're like, okay, she has a point of view. I feel a lot more confident putting, like that Alicia is going to work with her, because there's nothing worse than, representing someone like Alicia Vikander and putting them into a situation or a room with a filmmaker who's like, I don't know, like, what do you think? Like, no, the filmmaker knows. It's the captain, it's the leader, right? And when you work with talent at the level of UTA, CA, WME, like, those are the top end. They expect the best, right? And so that's something that we, as agents, try to smoke out. And so another is, how do we identify producers to work with? I think that's also an important thing. So, like I mentioned earlier, it's a lot of like personal taste. There's oftentimes producers that'll see a film that was, I remember this film called The Art of Self-Defense. I was like, this is the weirdest film. This is so, like, who produced this? Like, I want to know, like, who got behind this? And then I just met the producer, and we have like projects together now, and we have a beautiful relationship. And there's others like, obviously, like Paul Thomas Anderson's producer is a close friend, because it's like she's producer. Like, I love his movies, and you kind of find each other and you exchange ideas and you make introductions and whatnot. And so we do it proactively in that way. And oftentimes, at an agency, we cover projects for casting or at studios, and so that's how we meet producers. And frankly, if we like them, then it's like, okay, let's just like figure it out. Like, what do you got? Like, what can we put together? And so, and especially like on the international front, like recently I saw this film called Settlers, which is a Chilean film. I thought was really excellent. It looked really big, considering it was probably made for nothing. And I was like, who produced it? And I looked up, it was an Argentinian producer named Benjamin Domenech, who's produced, when I looked at his filmography, and I was like, oh wow, like this is really, he's produced a lot of really fancy films. Sure, maybe none of them have broken out in a major way, but this guy has taste, and he's a proven filmmaker in his market, so I want to meet him. And so that's like with Augenschein, these German producers I do a lot with. I did The Assessment with them. Pablo and Juan Lorraine's company I do a lot with, because they love genre as well, as much as they love the biopic. And there's a producer, Adrian Guerra, who we work with. He produced Rich Flew. I have an actor, Rafe Spall, that's in Rich Flew, and so he's someone we're going to meet up later, because he's someone I've worked with. He has great taste, and he has a great track record, and I want to figure out more things to do with him. And so, how this really applies and relates to everyone in this room, especially if you're a producer, is a lot of productions are moving abroad. So this water polo camp movie that I told you about that couldn't be more all-American was made in Romania, right? With Romanian kids in the background, but like select American kids that they brought over to play American. It is, when I tell you this film is all American, it is as American as can be, but it just was easier to make it in Romania. And so we found a Romanian producer to come partner with the American producer, and that's why we're always trying to find certain partners. When I was putting together The Assessment, we included Augenschein, the German producers, because it was really hard to get a female-led sci-fi thriller for, I think 15 million financed. But if we moved it to, Europe, and if we brought in a German producer, who then brought in a Spanish production, it was the weirdest thing. You have a French filmmaker, Fleur Fortuné, German producers and British producers, with a Spanish crew in Tenerife, with a Swedish actress, an American actress, and a British actress. It was like the most international, multilingual project ever, but that's how we were able to put it together. And it would not have been made if it weren't for our German producing partners that we included in this film. And so I wrote some examples here, like I worked with Chloe Okuno, who directed this film called Watcher. That was also shot in Romania. Even though you look at it, it's so simple. It's like 3 characters. It was so difficult to put together in the United States. So we look abroad to find international producers and partners that can, especially if they're able to access like soft cash, that just makes it that much easier. Goran Stolevski, You Won't Be Alone. Again, The Plague I brought up, The Dreadful is being shot in the UK. The First Omen, with Bill Nighy, we put that with 20th, and that was a debut for Akasha Stevenson. That was, shot in Rome, and of course, Assessment, as I brought up, was shot in Spain. So when we're looking for partners, it's that, right? It's like, who's producing cool stuff? Who's making really cool stuff that is going to like the major film festivals? Because, again, to put the talent that I work with in a movie abroad, you have to, the producers have to have a filmography that backs up their work, and a certain level of sophistication and pedigree. And I think we all know, but I'm just going to say it out loud, it is, horror and genre can still be sophisticated. It can still be sophisticated and elegant and elevated, right? We can look at examples like Ari Aster's movies, or Saint Maud, if you've seen that, or again, The Witch, or Zone of Interest is a horror film. Like those are examples of very sophisticated projects. And you look at those producers, and those are the people that we typically want to put our talent with. And so we're almost to the end. I hope this is like not exhausting everyone in this room so far. But another question that I get asked is, okay, but we're filmmakers, we're producers, we want to put together a movie, but how do we get our scripts to Gillian Anderson, to Alicia Vikander, to Jamie Dornan? These names that mean something internationally that can help greenlight financing. So it's basically everything that I brought up in the beginning, right? It's the filmmaker that has a vision, that is prepared. It's the producers that have worked really hard, and even producers that have done a lot of short films, or we still look at those, right? It's about the body of work. It is, frankly, and I think you can understand, if you're representing Bill Nighy, who's been in this industry for 50 years, and you're like, hey, this producer who's never produced anything ever wants you, how am I supposed to convince Bill to go shoot a $5 million indie with a producer that doesn't have a body of work when this man has worked with everyone, right? So these are things that we have to look at when we're trying to suggest for our acting talent. Because the truth is, all of them, they love genre. They do. They love a good genre film. They know it works. They know that's what's going to put people in the movie theater seats. And every actor wants to be seen. And some of the best performances have come from the genre space as well. There's been countless amazing, The Substance, Demi Moore, it's brought her back. Now she's getting all the offers, right? It's crazy. Toni Collette, what Hereditary did for her is incredible. And so a lot of actors do want to not only work in the genre space, but they want to work with international partners and filmmakers. So I'm bringing her up again because I work with her and we do so much together. But Alicia Vikander is obsessed with Korean horror films. One of her favorite films of all time is The Wailing by Na Hong-jin. I hope people have seen it. If you haven't seen it, it's a perfect movie. It's very scary. It's a masterpiece. And Na Hong-jin is now a client of the agency because he has always, for the longest time, wanted to make a international global project that's not just Korean. So he sent us a project that is a sci-fi horror film, is all I'm going to say, but has a bilingual capacity. It's mostly in Korean, but there was a way in with the script to bring in Hollywood talent. And so we introduced Na Hong-jin to Alicia Vikander. She was cast in the film. Then we got her husband cast, Michael Fassbender. Then we added Taylor Russell from Bones and All, if you've seen that, in Waves. We added Cameron Britton from Mindhunters. He played, what's his name? Ed, he was a serial killer. It was on the David Fincher show. And we put it together, we put the financing together, and it is, I think now, it is the most expensive film ever made out of Korea. I think a $35, $40 million budget. It's like a huge budget, and it's now in post-production, and you guys are going to see it, and I hope you remember this part of the conversation, because you'll see it as an example of a film that there's no English in it, but we're still able to find a way to make it, to cross over talent from different territories and making it bigger. And so the thing that we look for, because also like there's so many actors that are just multilingual in general. I mean, Gwyneth Paltrow is fluent in Spanish. I have several actors that are fluent in Spanish, right? So like they're always going to want to work in or find really Spanish, or projects in the Spanish language that can really stretch them. But this is not a genre film, but there's projects that are also bilingual that are able to be more accessible. I don't know if anyone saw Past Lives. But that was a perfect example of mostly in Korean, but it was a very universal film. We all know the sliding doors in our own lives, and so that's why I think it works. So when we're assessing international projects, especially those in the foreign language, we're looking if it's also accessible, right? Because the truth is, like, if you're sending me a film that is in the Macedonian language, how is it going to reach an audience? If you're sending a film in Catalan, how is it going to reach a bigger audience? And that is actually could be a really exciting challenge, because then if you nail it, it actually highlights the culture in a bigger way and makes it even have bigger global access, right? And that's what we did with Goran Stolevski's You Won't Be Alone. We put Numi Rapace in this film that was like a horror fairy tale. I don't know if you guys saw it. It was Focus Features distributed. It's incredible, but it's in the Macedonian language, right? But we're able to, add an international actress in to help make it bigger and broader. And I found these Flemish filmmakers, this other pair, that were writing a film that's set in Belgium, like in a rural small town. Then the scientist comes in, and I asked them, I was like, why can't the scientist be from England or Spain or France? And they're like, there's absolutely no reason why. This is the person that comes in that kind of shakes up the device that shakes up the story. And so those are things that we kind of think about and we talk about when we're talking about putting our actors into something, especially if it's in the foreign language. And one of the biggest tips that I try to give producers and filmmakers, especially in terms of casting, get a high-level, bona fide, real casting director. Like, it's a shame, because sometimes I've worked with producers that are very close friends of mine, and even Augenschein, these German producers, they were using casting directors that, frankly, like, they have an AOL account, right? I'm like, they're not really relevant, they're not really, like, if they're on my phone sheet, they're not the first person I'm calling back, versus these other 50 casting directors that we're all racing to get on their phone sheet and have, we hope that they, call us back or pick up the phone or whatever it is and take our submissions. And so it's one of those things where we look at a project based on your department heads, right? We want to know who's a cinematographer, who's the line producer, their body of work, but the casting director is a big part of that. Casting is a department. And so it's very important to make sure that you find someone that has like a serious, relevant, high-level body of work that confidently, if you're thinking about it, you're trusting this casting director to make a call to myself or whoever, that that casting director has relationships and that talent agent will call him back. And then before we open up to Q&A, the last part of really what I wanted to talk about is like, okay, so we have the script and the filmmaker and the actor and the producer, and they've been vetted across, by my desk and by my partners, and we've worked and we're ready to go out. How do we get the money? And so at UTA, we have so many different departments, but one department is our sales department, but our sales, we call it our indie financing or global financing group, but it's basically like a sales agency that's a service within our agency. And so they represent a lot of equity financiers, people that, are looking to finance movies and whatnot. And so, we use them to find, money. We also, we go out to other international sales agencies and try to sell off territories, sell Spain, sell Greece, sell Rome, sell Germany, blah, blah, and make up the budget. And basically the last thing I'll say is like the rule of thumb is that when it's under $7 million, the budget, it's we try to look into a pathway of independently financing, but anything above 7 million US oftentimes is probably easier to be set up at a specialty studio like A24 Neon, and anything above 15 is like a major studio. And so when we get a budget, that also dictates how we're gonna find the financing. So I know I just did a lot of talking. How much time do I have left? Okay, is there any quick questions that anyone has? I hope this was helpful. I know I just did a lot of information, but if there's any questions, I'd love to ask. Yeah.
My name is Carlos. We are working on producing a. Oh, is it on? There. Hi. My name is Carlos. We are working on producing a pilot short for an animated series, a sci-fi animated series. And as the creator, I've always had like certain specific people in mind for certain roles that I kind of like, in a certain sense, almost wrote around. Obviously, I'm thinking like, you know, I'm not talking about reaching out to Tom Hanks or anything like that. And we, you know, did our research and we've put together agency contacts and all that stuff. I just kind of wanted to ask if you would have any advice in terms of like how to approach those potential conversations, and in regards to your note about the casting director, how we could potentially find and partner with somebody that might have access to those relationships.
Okay, so working backward from
Thank you.
Working backward from your question is, you know, if look at the style and the tone. I don't want to assume what your project is, right? But if it's like Rick and Morty, look who cast Rick and Morty and email them, right? Like those casting directors want jobs, and sometimes if they can't take it because they're not available, you can often ask for a recommendation. But then you reach out and you do inquiries. We call them avail checks with those casting directors. So think about like, you know, maybe yours is like Coralie, you know, or like a Tim Burton or something like that. Like who casts those animated projects? Because those casting directors probably understand your tone, style, be able to talk about you. So that's, and they would have cast something that you would have respected, right, if you're going to reach out to them. Now, in terms of agency contacts, you know, to do voiceover roles or whatnot, if it's voiceover. So every agency, even the tier 2, like the smaller firms, have a voiceover department. And so it's finding those voiceover agents, and oftentimes on IMDb Pro, it will say for commercial or voiceover, like there's a talent agent that you can reach out to, but there's also, if someone reaches out to me about a Pixar movie for someone, I'm looping in my colleague Brittany, who does all of that, right? Because that's her department, she does those deals. It's just not we have an expert in that space. And so you look up the people that you want in this project, and you see maybe they're all represented by the same agency, or there's 2 at the same agency, and it's like the same voiceover agent, and you reach out to them, you know, with your project. That's what I would recommend. Yeah.
Hello. A couple of years ago, I was on a festival listening to one of my country's directors. I'm from Venezuela, Alejandro Hidalgo. He made The Exorcisms of God and a couple of films.
I put together a Venezuelan language.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
With Jorge, Thielen, Armand. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I know.
Yeah.
Well, and he was saying that he decided to do his film in English because being in English was easier to distribute. So now you're telling me this, and I'm like, okay, this is another point of view. So I would like to know, like, deeper into it, because I think it's a very big decision to decide to do the film in English or to do it in Spanish. And I had another question, but I forgot.
So no, but okay. So here's the truth: is that is right. It is English is the common language of the world right now, for most part, right? Like the fact that you can understand me, but I don't speak Spanish, and I took Spanish from kindergarten through college, and I barely speak it, right? And so it is just easier to distribute an English language film because so many countries understand it. But what I'm saying is that when you have foreign language films that have an accessibility to, especially in the genre space, they still, like, genre has been able to transcend language, which is why Galder's film, The Platform, was able to be so successful, because we all love Snowpiercer, Hunger Games, Squid Games. It's kind of like, you know, it fits within sequence in that, and like, everyone has the subtitles. And so what I'm saying is that if you are making a Spanish language film, but it has a genre bent to it, right? And you feel like it has access that's not so specific. It's not about a little village and a little boy who finds a ghost. Like, it has something that kind of feels more global in reach. I keep using the platform as an example, but that's an example. Then you can, there's still a pathway to make it in the Spanish language. But if there's an opportunity within your project to incorporate English, right? Like, maybe it's in the casting of someone, right? That is from Hollywood or from the UK or whatever it is. And sometimes these people just happen to speak, like Colin Firth speaks Italian, again, Gwyneth Paltrow, so many, Will Smith speaks Spanish. Like, there's so many different examples of like stars that just want to actually flex their language skills. Bradley Cooper speaks French, right? And they're often not submitted those kind of projects. And so Jim Cummings, who I work with, I don't know if you know who he is at Thunder Road, Wolf of Snow Hollow. He's a client I represent. He's fluent in French and dying to do a film in French. And so that's another way to like figure it out. But it's just thinking like, okay, if I'm struggling putting it together in Spanish language, is there another way I can, without compromising the integrity of the creative, that can still open it up so that it's less of a risk to financiers?
Thank you. And the other question was, what do you think about the strategy of doing a short film, like a proof of concept for a feature film? That's still a thing?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. We take those very seriously. Okay. The Plague was off of a proof of concept called The Sauna, which was so meditative and really slow, but the craft was so well done. And then he was like, okay, so let's take this, but it's actually going to be a body horror film. So,
thank you.
Yeah. I think I see someone back here. Okay.
Hi, my name is Sergio. I'm an actor, so this question is going to be more from the other side. I studied in New York, at the Stella Adler Studio of Acting, to pick at that English because I feel there's more and more opportunities for Spanish actors or for projects that are being done in Spanish that more and more people are interested in, since Money Heist or Elite, say. And I recently did a movie shot in Slovakia with people from all around the world, with Christopher Hivju from Game of Thrones, with Dave Bautista from the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise. And it's because they were looking for someone with a Spanish accent. So I feel there's more and more opportunities, but I still struggle in finding those opportunities. And I was wondering, would you say Spotlight is the best option to get in contact with those productions that are looking for actors, or do you think there's other channels that we can resort to find and get into those auditions? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. And the truth is, it's going to be difficult for me to answer only because I work in Hollywood, right? So I don't know as it pertains to, like, if you lived in LA and worked in Hollywood, I'd say, well, there's the AFI, there's USC, those filmmakers that are in the graduate program are Ryan Coogler, Sam Esmail. So many amazing filmmakers have come out of those and like working, building filmography and relationships with those people. But also, yeah, I think it's called Actors Access. We use Breakdown Express, which is like the agent version of that. There's Spotlight, of course. The truth is, for international men, it's always been really hard. It's always been a much more difficult journey than women for some reason. I think it's because Hollywood has there's like this fetishization of like the exotic woman, right? And for men, it used to be really, really difficult. It's become much more open now to having men with accents and et cetera. But what I will say is, if you do have an accent, the truth is a lot of people from Europe or Latin America, whatever it is, they're really focusing on trying to neutralize their accent to do an American accent as much as possible because, yeah, it does limit opportunities ultimately. And I'm sure for someone like you don't want to just play the Spanish guy, right? You want to stretch, and you want to do things like, if Dev Patel can play a medieval knight, why can't I, right? And so I think some of those, what I've seen from casting directors and filmmakers and conversations, it comes down to an accent thing. And I represent Daniel Bruhl, who was obviously here like just a few days ago. And that's something that he's really mastered, is trying to, because he speaks German and Spanish and French and trying to figure out how you can get more roles by, by being able to neutralize your accent. So in terms of like where to find those opportunities, I can't necessarily say I know exactly as it pertains to Europe, but in America we have those like those the bulletins that post the casting ops and whatnot, and you kind of build, and there's showcases, there's also theater and stuff, and every now and then like there's something that comes along that's an open call, and those are able to progress, an actor's career. Yeah. All right. Do we have one more? Is that right? Okay, last one right here.
Hi, I'm just curious, how much do you think about projects, if the matter tackled by a project or its style are something that, while you're packaging, determine already its distribution window? If you think, this is a streaming movie, this is a movie worth of going to, and how much is it, a hierarchy as it might be here in Europe?
If I understand your question, I think I understand your question. It's like, how do we determine where film is going to exist, right? If it's streaming, if it's theatrical, what is the best path? It's like every film, this is like another American phrase that probably feels appropriate because it sitches, is like, there's many ways to skin the cat, in terms of where does a project exist, right? And there are some films that just feel like they should be on a streaming platform. I don't know how to really describe it. You just know it when you see it, you're like, that is a Netflix movie, right? That could work well. And there's sometimes where we see something on Netflix like, oh, that was a big mistake. That should have been a theatrical movie, right? Or that could have really done well in the box office. Horror does well in the box office. And truth be told, like, there was a moment where Disney Plus and all these movies or these places were trying to throw a lot of their movies on streaming, and they realized it was actually losing money. I represent Greta Lee. I put 3 of my actors in Tron. They're doing Tron. I think you guys know this, the franchise. They're rebooting it. And the first question I asked Disney, I was like, is this gonna be like on the platform? And they're like, no, we don't make any money from that. We have to put it out theatrically, and also it's in service of a bigger thing, because the Tron ride in Shanghai, Disneyland, is the biggest ride over there. So it's interesting because sometimes you see movies are made not necessarily because someone just was like, I'm going to make this movie. It's because it's in service of another portion of the business, right? But with like The Plague, once we see a cut of it, we'll be able to determine first what festival it goes to. And for me already, based on the script and the subject matter, it does feel like an A24 film. It feels like a neon film. And then sometimes things are just much bigger. When they feel bigger, like The Assessment sold to Amazon worldwide for a high 7-figure deal because it feels big in scope. It doesn't feel really, really small. And so it's hard to answer your question because you're talking about something that is very important, but it can't be decided until like we know who's cast. If you cast Will Smith or Mark Wahlberg in your film, it's gonna do something. If you cast Millie Bobby Brown in the lead, she's a streaming star. Joey King, she's a streaming star. You cast Margaret Qualley, Florence Pugh, she's a theatrical star, right? Like, it kind of, that, even the casting will dictate kind of the path of the film. And so it just depends on the exact case. It's like a case that we review and we kind of make a recommendation from that. All right, thank you all. Yeah.